Welcome to Surrender School. So once again, with Surrender School presents Joe and Charlie Big Book Study. This is week 7, step 4, part 1. As an introduction, we always get introduced to Joe and Charlie. These are the tapes that we'll be using, or the recordings that we'll be using. Joe M. and Charlie P. met in the 1970s, found that they had a passion and an interest in the AA's Big Book and the history of the AA Big Book, and they got together, started studying it together, and everything that they learned, they started sharing with other people. And once they started sharing it with other people, someone asked them to record it. Could they record it? And so there are about 8 different recordings of this step study, and the one that we're using once again is on YouTube. And they always start their talks with indicating that they are not the gurus for Alcoholics Anonymous, neither the fellowship nor the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. They do not speak for AA as a whole. And just like Joe and Charlie, I am not an expert or a guru, nor do I speak for any 12-step group. I simply have a passion for the Big Book, and I want to be able to carry the message. AA Big Book Step Study, and this is week 7, how it works. We're going to start with step 4, part 1. We're going to pick up on page 63. Well, I think we'll do 63 through 67, and the next week we'll pick up at the end of 67 through 71. So remember, the layout of this book is step 1, the problem, is also the first goal of this book. And we found the problem in the doctor's opinion and in Bill's story. We found the complete steps in Bill's story, actually, but that is where we defined the problem in Bill's story. And then step 2, or goal number 2, the solution, we went in chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4. There is a solution, more about alcoholism, and we agnostics. And then in chapter 3, we went into how it works. We went into the first part of that, and we completed step 3 last week. And we will go into step 4 today of how it works. So that is where we are in our step study right now. So let's get started. If you are following along with me, we're at the bottom of page 63 of your AA Big Book, top of page 64. And we're going to first hear from Charlie. Charlie's going to do most of the talking for step 4. And so we'll first hear from Charlie. If you're having any problems hearing me, please let me know.
Let's go to the bottom of page 63. We've made our decision. We've uttered our prayer. And the book says, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Now, we always like to stop here for just a moment and look at the time element between step 3 and step 4. We always hear people asking the question, how long should you wait after you do step 3 until you start on step 4? And we hear all kinds of answers. Sometimes they'll say, well, 30 days, and maybe 90 days, or maybe 6 months. We heard a professional in the field one time counseling people to wait a minimum of 2 years. And our question back to that person was, how many people have you killed with that statement? You see, we're trying to find a way to live where we not only can be sober, but we can have a little peace of mind, serenity, and happiness. And every day that we put off and procrastinate step 4 is a day that we're still filled with resentments, a day that we're still filled with shame and fear and guilt and remorse. Our book tells us when we should take step 4. Step 3 will have little permanent effect unless at once followed by this strenuous effort, which is step 4. And you know that does make sense, doesn't it? As far back as I can remember, 4 has always followed immediately after 3. Now, knowing that and knowing we might get drunk if we don't get on with step 4, why would we still tend to procrastinate? And I think 2 or 3 reasons behind it. Number 1 is fear. Let us be the first to say today that if we take step 4, according to the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, there is nothing whatsoever to be afraid of. And I think we're all going to see that in just a little bit. Okay, knowing there's nothing to be afraid of, then why would we still tend to procrastinate? And I think probably one of the greatest reasons is simply confusion.
Absolutely. One of the biggest parts for me for taking this step was I was very confused as to how to do it out of the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was using the 12 and 12. I was using other methods that I bought online, but I honestly never got the recovery that I have today until I started doing it the way that I saw it in the Big Book. And that was through the help of a sponsor, by the way. So we're going to go on to according to the Big Book, well, we could not see how to do step 4, and that certainly was my story. And if you'll notice the book over here, it says Reading for Dummies, and it's upside down. Actually, that is how I felt when I was reading the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, these steps, trying to do the steps out of them, because it didn't mean the same thing to me. So let's hear what Charlie has to say about that.
For years, we could not see how to do step 4 according to the Big Book. And the reason we couldn't see it is the instructions are there, but they are so simple that we alcoholics, with our keen intellectual alcoholic minds, looking for something more complicated, overlook the simplicity of step 4. So in our desperation, we read over in step 5 something about sharing all your life story. And we said, oh, that's what they wanted us to do in step 4, is write our life story so we could share it in step 5. We just never could see them before because we didn't understand how Bill writes. And I think today, if we can just kind of sit back and relax, look at a few simple ideas, we're going to see how easy this thing really is. There's 2 things we got to remember. First, he loved to use comparisons. Talking about one thing that we already know to teach us something new. Also, he did not like to repeat himself using the same words over and over. So he would tell us something, then turn around and tell it again, but use different words the second time. And bearing those 2 thoughts in mind, I think we can see how simple this thing really is. He starts out by saying, therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. Immediately he jumps into business. He says a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. And I think his first comparison is this. You know, if you had a business, and I don't care what it is, selling ladies' purses, men's watches, bicycles, or whatever, if you did an inventory once in a while, and by the way, inventory is defined as a written list of items. If you did an inventory once in a while, you wouldn't know what's become damaged. Nobody wants to buy it. It's sitting there taking up valuable floor space day after day after day. If you had a business and you did an inventory once in a while, you probably would go broke, and I think we can all see that. Okay, in our personal lives, we have a business too. Greatest business in the world for us. And it's the business of finding a way to live where we can have a little peace of mind, serenity, and happiness so we don't have to go back to drinking. And if we don't inventory in our personal business, chances are we're not going to find what's damaged and unsaleable in our heads that's going to cause us to go broke too. And going broke for us is simply going back to drinking.
I could not effectively do this until I had a sponsor. I had to have a sponsor who had worked the steps and who knew these steps to be able to assist me. I could not see what I couldn't see. I couldn't do it on my own. I tried several times, but I simply could not do this on my own. It did take me getting someone to take me through the steps to be able to assist me with the understandings that I need for personal growth. So now we're going to look over at business and personal. What is the differences? What are the likenesses? We are on page 64 if you're following along with us. We're going to start with talking about a business inventory.
Dealing with a personal business or a business, in either case, we would probably go broke without the inventory. Now then, he's going to tell us how to take a business inventory. He says, taking a commercial. Now, dad burn him, he could have said business again, couldn't he? But he'll use the word commercial, which means the same thing. Taking a commercial inventory. Now, Joe, up here on the screen, and you also have it in your handout material, we're going to have a little picture up here that's going to be called inventory comparison. I think it's step 5 in your handout sheet. On one side says business, the other one says personal. And we're going to take a few key words out of the big book and put it under business. He said taking a commercial inventory is a fact finding, and we're putting fact finding under business. And a fact-facing process, we're putting fact-facing under business. It is an effort to discover the truth, and we're putting truth under business, about the stock in trade, and we're putting stock in trade under business. The stock in trade is what's in there to sell. The ladies' purses, the men's watches, the bicycles, or whatever. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, and we're putting under object, under business, disclose damaged or unsaleable goods. To get rid of them promptly and without regret. And we're putting promptly and without regret under business. In other words, we're going to go in there and we're going to try to find the facts. When we find them, we're going to face the facts. We're looking for the truth about the stock in trade. We're trying to find the damaged and unsaleable goods. The good items will not cause us to go broke. Oh, they resell every day and we're making money off of them. The damaged and unsaleable goods, they're the ones that's blocking the floor space and the shelf space and costing us money. When we finally find them, we're going to try to get rid of them promptly and without regret. We can't put anything new in their place until they're gone. We're trying to find the stock in trade that's damaged and get it out of there. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. He's got to be honest. Once in a while, he'll try to fool himself. He'll say, well, the reason these ladies aren't buying these purses is they just don't understand what's good for them. You know, he made the decision to buy them. He hates to admit that he made a mistake. And he may keep them in there longer than he should, and if he does, it's going to cost him money every day. Is there anybody in here would have any problem with what he's told us about the business inventory? That we're going to try to find the facts. When we find them, we're going to face them. We're looking for the truth about the stock in trade. We're looking for the damaged and unsaleable goods. When we get rid of them, when we find them, we're going to get rid of them promptly and without regret. Always looking for the stock in trade that's damaged. Anybody got any problems there? Okay, now watch him. He used a series of words to tell us how to take our personal inventory, which means basically the same thing.
So now we're going to look at the personal inventory, the right side of the page, if you're following along with us with the handout. These are the things that are about us that equal the same as the business, but they're about our personal selves, our personalities, our physical person, our mind, the way that we think. This is what this is going to be about. So once again, we're on page 64 again, and now we're going to talk about the personal side of this worksheet or this handout.
He said we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. So we go to step 4, and step 4 says, now we're under personal on the right-hand side of the sheet. Step 4 said we made a searching. And we're putting searching straight across from fact-finding. They mean the same thing. To find the facts, to search out the facts. We made a searching fearless. And we're putting fearless straight across from fact-facing. They mean the same thing. To face the facts, to fearlessly look at them. We made a searching fearless moral. And there's where we got in trouble. We said, oh, damn. There's that list of dirty, filthy, nasty items. And we don't want to look at them, and we sure as hell don't want to show them to anybody else. Now, I'm not sure what all Bill Wilson knew. But I know one thing, this guy understood the English language. And I really believe that if he'd wanted you and I to make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items, he would have said we made a searching and fearless amoral or immoral inventory.
Good point.
He didn't say that. He said moral. Bugged the hell out of us. Till eventually we went back to the dictionary. Do you know what the word moral is defined as? Truth. Things as they really are. The right and wrong of any given situation. The truth about things. So truth and moral mean exactly the same thing. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of what? Of ourselves. We're the only stock in trade that we have in this business of staying sober. Nobody else can make us sober, and nobody else can make us drink. Oh, I'll agree, they can make us thirsty as hell once in a while, but they can't make us drink. We decide whether we drink or not. Now, what part of us decides whether we drink or not? Is it our body or is it our mind? The real problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind. So we're going to look inside ourselves, in our minds, and we're going to find those flawed thinking processes, which is the damaged and unsaleable goods, that block us off from God. Now, we've made a decision to turn our will over to God. And as long as our mind is filled with damaged and unsaleable goods, then God can't direct our thinking. We're going to have to find them, and after we once find them, then we're going to get rid of them promptly and without regret.
That was amazing to me because for the longest time, I was looking outside of myself. I was looking what other people did to me and how I reacted, but it was more about what they did to me. So this was very helpful for me, seeing it and saying it laid out like this so that I can understand what Bill was talking about when I read it. Because the first time I read it, I didn't understand it. But when it got broken down like this, I definitely understood it a little bit better. So we are going to move on to flawed thinking. And boy, does Charlie have a lot to say about this. So we're still on page 64 here. And we are not going to be reading from the big book, but he is going to share a lot of knowledge about flawed thinking with us.
And when those flawed thinking processes leave our minds, then our mind is opened up for God's thinking to enter. But it's only after they're gone that God can enter. Now, there are three common manifestations of a life run on self-will, and we've already talked about them. The flawed thinking processes in our mind that blocks God out are resentments, fear, guilt and remorse associated with the harms done to other people. And as long as our mind is occupied with those thoughts, then God's thoughts can't come in. It's just that simple. God dwells in each of us. We know the difference between right and wrong. We do these things that hurt other people. We're scared to death what they're going to do when they find out, and the guilt and remorse begins to eat us up. God can't get in that storeroom. He's already blocked out of there. Things all right.
Yeah.
Now, if I want God to direct my thinking, then I'm going to have to do something about the removal of these resentments and these fears and this guilt and remorse. And if I can remove them, then God's thinking can enter into my mind and direct those portions of my mind where He was effectively blocked out. Now, my book is getting ready to show me just exactly how to look at these things truthfully. It's getting ready to show me how to remove them. Then the greatest thing it's going to show me is how to keep them from coming back in the future. And if I'll do my part, then God can direct my thinking. But until I've done my part, God can't. It's just that simple. He says we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly, truthfully, morally. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways and what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. There's more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we've been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper.
And that gives us a clue that we're now going to have to go look at another handout, which is going to be the resentment form. And we'll see that in a couple of slides. There's a little bit more information that Bill's going to want to give to us about this. Let me just turn off the laser pointer here. Sorry about that. So we're going to start with definition of resentment. Do we even know what resentment means? Of course, we think we know, but let's find out what it actually means.
Now, I think we need to look at that word and make sure we understand what it means. The word resentment is made from two old words. First are the letters R-E, re. When you see re in front of another word, it always means to do again. Like repaint, replay, redo, always means to do again. The last part of this word, sentiment, comes from an old word called sentire, which means to feel. So the word resentment itself means to re-feel. One of the problems, it's standard. From time to time, other people get sick in self. Maybe their social instinct is out of kilter. Maybe their security instinct or their sex instinct is fouled up. And they do something to me that threatens one of my basic instincts of life. Maybe they put me down in the eyes of other people, and it threatens my self-esteem. Maybe they do something to threaten one of my personal relationships. Maybe they rip me off and steal my money from me. Maybe they do something to interfere with my sex life. Or maybe they do something that threatens one of my ambitions for the future. Now, when they do that, that's a wrong on their part for doing so. That's not a resentment. It doesn't become a resentment till I go over in the next room, or I go home that evening, and I replay that thing in my mind, and I feel the pain the second time. The first time they did it to me hurt me, but when I go over here and replay it and feel the pain the second time, then I'm doing it to myself now. They did it to me the first time, but I'm doing it the second time. And after a while, I'll replay it again. And I'll feel the pain the third time. And what I found in my life is I'm not always completely honest with me. because it seems as though when I replay this thing, each time I tend to change it just a little bit. And I tend to make what they did to me just a little bit worse. I tend to make what I did just a little bit less. I tend to make the pain just a little bit deeper. And you let me play it over in my head enough times, after a while I can say to myself, I was just standing there doing nothing. And they come along and did it to me.
Boy, can I identify with that. One of my core values that I have, and I'll give you two of them, is that I said I would never stay with someone who cheats on me. Never. I don't want to ever be with someone that cheats on me. Another one of my core values is that I will not stay with someone who mistreats people, especially service people, service industry people. Just a pet peeve of mine. I always said that I would never do that. Those were core values until I met somebody and I fell in love with them. Boy, I feel hard too. And I found myself compromising my own self-worth to be with him. And when his true nature finally emerged, and it does, as it will with most narcissists, I ignored it because I was so in love, right? And when the relationship came to the inevitable end, as it would have to, I played that resentment that I had about him cheating and him mistreating people over and over and over, to the point where you would have thought that I had no part in staying in that relationship long as I did. I was in it for a year. He was in it for 30 days, if that gives you any indication of how very badly I blew my own core values. So today I recognize, because I was doing the steps this way, that was many years ago, by the way. And it wasn't until I started doing the steps this way that I recognized my part in losing my own dignity, my part in holding on to that resentment, because I did play a part in it. And we're going to find out a little bit about that. And maybe I'll bring up a little bit more of the story after the recording is over, if anybody cares to hear it. And with that, we'll move on to self-resentment and self-pity. So, and we are still, I think, around page 64 here that we're talking, but he's telling us a little bit about resentment and self-pity. So let's see what Charlie has to say about that.
Now, we alcoholics have up here in our heads a little resentment replay machine. And we get up in the mornings and we toot it up in living color. We clean the lens on it because we don't want to miss nothing. And we shine it on the world all day long. And we record everything they do to us that's bad. And we go home at night and sit down and play it over in our head and make ourselves sick and blame it on them. Now, once in a while we have a bad day. Once in a great while, they won't do anything to us.
That's a bad day for an alcoholic.
We've got our machine cleaned up, the lens is clean, tuned up, we shine it on the world, and nobody will do anything to us. We don't have anything bad to record.
Don't record nothing good.
Do you know what we record those days? By God, we record what they're thinking. That's what we do. We go home at night, play it over in our head, make ourselves sick. Now, there's a bad thing about a resentment. Because each time you play it over your head, each time you throw it out there, after a while, it turns around, it comes back at you. And when it comes back at you, it comes back as self-resentment. And we begin to resent ourselves for being in a position to have those things happen to us. And after a while, self-resentment turns to self-pity. Is there any way that God can enter a mind filled with that kind of crap? No way. Our thinking is controlled and dominated by these resentments and all the things that go along with it. God is absolutely, completely blocked out of our mind through these resentments.
So now we're going to actually look at the resentment, review of resentments handout. This is the blank version. This is what it looks like, but you're going to see that I'm going to show you, it's going to be broken down section by section here coming up in the next couple of screens.
Now, the instructions on how to do them are here in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. They're just so simple that we never could see them before. We've given you a sheet in your handout material called a review of resentments. I believe that's page 9 and 10. And what I would ask you to do now is take those last two columns, try to fold them over where you can't even see them, where all you're looking at is column 1, 2, and 3. The example on page 65 has already been filled out. And we didn't know the procedure that Bill used to fill it out. That's where a lot of our confusion is. So what we've given to you in the first three columns is page 65 in the blank form. We want to emphasize we're not trying to bring another inventory in AA. We've already got enough of those. Page 65, the resentment sheet that you have is 65 in the blank form. Column 1, I'm resentful at. Column 2 is the cause. Column 3 affects my. Now let's see if we can't find the instructions on how to fill it out. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Okay, you've got the paper now, and we're going to start setting them down.
Well, we didn't know how to fill out this column. It seems to us that you fill this out one column at a time from top to bottom, leaving a little space in between the names in column 1. So you'll fill that in over in column 2 and a little bit later. Because our book said that we listed people, institution, or principle with whom we are angry, period. From top to bottom in column 1, we would simply write down all the people, principles, or institution with whom we are angry from top to bottom, leaving a little space between each one of them all the way down.
People, that's self-explanatory. Institutions are those things such as the police department, the Internal Revenue Service, the federal government, the church, etc. Principles are those old guiding, I hate to use the word laws, but it's the only thing I can think of, natural laws that's interfered with our style of living.
So that was column 1 that we've just done. We just looked at it based on what is written on page 65. And I'll try to do just what's in the big book, and we can add our own after the recording. So now we're still on page 65, and now we're looking at column number 2, if you'll follow along with me.
Bill said Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, and my wife. He probably had more than that. I think he just didn't want to use any more space in the big book.
Why we were angry, period. Stop right there and go to the second column, the cause. Now, he's in the illustration, and he used here very short and sweet, just 4 or 5 little words, not too many words to describe the cause. Simplicity is the key here in the second column. Now, he's resentful at Mr. Brown. Why? His attentions to my wife. He told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. Now, I don't even know Mr. Brown. I'm already mad at him myself. And he's resentful at Miss Jones because she's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend, and she's a gossip. What she did was put his old drinking buddy in the nut house, and he don't like that at all. Now, he's mad at his employer. Why? Well, he's unreasonable and unjust and overbearing.
Probably said, say, Bill, by the way, where were you all day yesterday anyhow?
He threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account.
That's unreasonable as hell, isn't it?
Yeah, very narrow-minded. Now, he's really mad at his wife. She misunderstands and nags, and she likes Old Brown. And she wants the house put in her name.
Yeah.
You tie that together, liking Old Brown, wanting the house put in her name, it's about time to get a little bit upset, isn't it? So simply in the second column, we just write down, we ask ourselves why we were angry beside each name one at a time, using 4 or 5 little words to describe the cause. There may be one cause or there may be 2 or 3 causes, but we simply write them down in the second column.
I filled out the second column, and I began to realize something that's become very valuable to me. I began to realize it's not the people and the institutions that I'm upset with. It's what they've done to me that's got me upset. You know, I can take Mr. Brown out of here and put Mr. Green in. I'll be just as upset with Green as I am with Brown if he does the same thing to me. It's not them that's got me upset. It's what they've done to me that's got me upset. Now, the reason that's valuable is because of this. I'm getting ready to start out on a lifetime-changing process to develop the best possible relationship that I can with the world and everybody in it, so I can have maximum peace of mind and serenity. A part of that relationship is a little later on in my program, I'm going to have to go to a bunch of people and ask them to forgive me for what I've done to them. By the same token, I'm going to have to forgive others for what they've done to me. And a part of that forgiving process can start right here, when I begin to realize it's not them, it's what they've done that's got me upset. So I filled out 2 columns now. Number 1, I learned how resentful I really am, how much that blocks me from God. And number 2, I've learned it's not them I resent, it's what they've done to me that I actually resent.
Oh boy, it took me years to understand that I wasn't resentful towards the person, but the action that that happened. And then I replayed it in my head over and over and over again, and it became about that person. I've lost lifelong friends over the last 10 years because of me playing a scenario over and over and over in my head. And now I'm even questioning, did it really happen that way? So yeah, it was powerful for me to see it in this manner. So we're going to go on to column number 3 here. We're at the bottom of page 64, at the top of page 65, and we're going to learn a little bit more about column number 3.
Now let's look at the third column.
In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened, so we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, or our personal or sex relations which have been interfered with? We were usually definite as this example. And again, using that information that we got from the basic instincts of life, we simply fill out the third column. What part of self was affected by that? What basic instinct was threatened by the actions that those people did?
I can't be upset with you unless you've done something to threaten one of these basic instincts of life. If you threaten my social instinct in any way, my self-esteem, my personal relations, etc., you're going to upset me and make me angry. If you threaten my security, either material or emotional, you're going to upset me and make me angry. If you threaten my sex life in any way, you're going to upset me and make me angry. And as I begin to fill out the third column and put down the part of self that is affected, in most cases I begin to see a pattern develop. Maybe beside each name I'm putting down self-esteem. Maybe I begin to see my main problem is self-esteem. I begin to see which part of self really does stand out. To understand where anger comes from. I always thought it was just one of those feelings that flitted into your mind. You could do nothing about it. Today I realize that anger comes from a threat to one of these basic instincts of life. Now, if my basic instincts are under control at the level that God intended, if my relationship with God is okay, You can do about anything you want to me, and I'm not going to experience anger over it. But I'll guarantee you, if my instincts are out of control, my relationship with God is not right, about anything you do to me that threatens a basic instinct creates anger. Now, we have filled out 3 columns. Column 1, we listed the people we're angry with, resentful at, and we realized how resentful we really are and how much that blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Column 2, we've learned it's not them we're resentful at, it's what they've done to us. Column 3, we've learned it's not even what they've done to us. It's how we choose to react to it based on our relationship with God and whether our instincts are under control or not. Okay. When we have finished out these 3 columns, and we've been able to see column 1, how many resentments we have, column 2, the cause of the resentment, column 3, the part of self that was affected, and we've learned valuable information about ourselves just by filling out those 3 sheets. Now then, let's see what we do with those 3 sheets after they're filled out, Joe.
So now this is the completed sheet of what those sections that were broken down came together for column 1, column 2, and column 3 based on what is on page 65, talking about Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, and my wife. So now let's see what happens. How do we get rid of these now? What happens next? We have to pray. We have to give it away. So let's hear what Joe and Charlie have to say about that.
In the big book in step 4. We always hear about the step 3 prayers, the step 7 prayers. We never hear about the step 4 prayers. Let's see how we can use prayer to remove those deep, deep-seated resentments.
He said, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. So you can't heal a sick wine with a sick mind. You can't wish your way out of it. Well, this was our course. We realized that the people who'd wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. And though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. It's part of the prayer. We asked God to help us to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done.
I think the reason this works so well is prayer for another human being. Prayer for their welfare and their happiness is probably one of the greatest expressions of love that one human being can have for another. And love and hate can't exist on the same plane. And as we pray for that human being, asking that God give them in their life the same thing we want in ours, peace of mind, serenity, happiness, etc., over a period of time, that resentment will begin to disappear. But it would do me no good to get rid of resentments if I didn't know how to keep them from coming back. Because the world is full of sick people. And they're going to do it to me again tomorrow. And if I'm not careful, I'll resent. Let's unfold those last 2 columns on your inventory sheet. And let's go to page 67. And we'll see if we can't find the information to fill out the last 2 columns. In the second paragraph on page 67, it says, referring to our list again. See, you got to have a written inventory. This is the second time we've had to go back to it now. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Uh-oh. We've never done this, have we? We've always looked to see what they did. We've never looked to see what we did. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them, we placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So we go to the fourth column. And if you'll notice, the heading on the fourth column said, "What did I do?" Putting out of mind the wrongs others have done, I resolutely look for my own mistakes. What did I do, if anything, to set in motion trains of circumstances which in turn caused people or institutions to hurt me and eventually led to my resentment of them for doing so? So I went to column 4.
So in column 4, we're going to look at, I've marked column 4 based on the examples that were in the big book to the best of my abilities. There really wasn't a point saying, oh, this is selfishness, this is, this is being fear or anything like that. There really wasn't direction on that, but based on the information that I now have, I was able to mark up column number 4. So we're going to hear a little bit more from Charlie. We're almost done. We only have about 3 more slides or so to go. So now we are still on page 66, I think, 66 or so, I think so.
So I went to column 4. What did you do, if anything, to set that in motion? And it took me just about 5 seconds to realize that if I hadn't been out there screwing around, she probably wouldn't have caught me. And she probably wouldn't have filed for divorce in the first place. It took me another 2 or 3 seconds to say to myself, well, if I hadn't been sneaking around behind her back, lying to her all the time, completely dishonest with her, she probably wouldn't have filed for divorce in the first place. Another 3 or 4 seconds, and I was able to say to myself, well, if I hadn't been blowing all of our money on booze and what I think was important, she probably wouldn't have filed for divorce in the first place. And I began to realize why I loved that resentment. Because you see, when I could concentrate on her filing for divorce and play that over and over and over and over in my head, gradually distorting the picture every time I played it over, making what she did a little bit worse and what I did a little bit less, and let me play it long enough, I could gradually transfer all blame to her and make myself as pure as the driven snow. And it was all her damn fault in the first place. I thought, my God, Charlie, have you done that with any other resentments here? I went down through my list of resentments. I never found a name on there that I hadn't done something to them to set this thing in motion. And I had resented it and played it over and over and distorted the picture, transferred all blame to them, made myself as pure as the driven snow by being able to transfer blame to others. And none of us realize how much we've been doing that until we take an honest look at these resentments and see the part that we played.
If you'll remember the story that I told you just a bit ago about the relationship that I had, that I absolutely just blew my own core values. This was a perfect example of that. I actually absolutely stayed when I should have left. I should have been like Barbara. If you listen to this full thing, you know that it's Barbara. He's talking about his wife is the person that he's using that example. I should have left like Barbara left. I could not blame him because the fact of the matter was, after about 30 days or so of me being abstinent, of us going out all the time, I went back to eating. And everybody knows what happens to an addict that goes back to using their drug of choice. They get insane. And I couldn't see my own part in that. I wanted to make him love me. I wanted to make things right. Now I have to take that responsibility. I can't blame him, but for years I did. And for years he was the bad guy. And for years I couldn't see my part until my sponsor pointed it out to me. So very, very grateful for this step. So next we're going to be looking at column number 5. Now I didn't fill in this column only because there's so much information and it just would not fit. So just use your imagination of what it's saying based on the previous slide of what Charlie was talking about when he talked about Barbara, his wife. So with that being said, this is column number 5 that we're going to look at now.
Now in the 5th column, you see the major character defects talked about in the big book. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, or inconsiderate? All other character defects stem from these. In the 5th column, I asked myself this question: which of the above character defects caused me to do what I did? Or caused me to want to hold on to the old resentment even though I may have done nothing to cause it? If I hadn't been so selfish, I wouldn't have been out there doing those things that hurt my wife and children. If I hadn't have been so dishonest, I wouldn't have been sneaking around behind her back lying to her all the time. If I hadn't been so self-seeking and frightened, saying to myself, man, you're getting close to 40 years old. If you're ever going to do some of that, you better go do it before it's too late. Fear drives us to do things like that. If I hadn't been so inconsiderate of my wife and children, I wouldn't have been taking the chance of hurting them in the first place. I began to see in the 5th column the type character I had become through my years of living a life run on self-will. And when I saw it, I didn't like it. It made me sick. You see, I always fancied myself as a reasonably good person until I saw how I'd become so selfish and so dishonest and so inconsiderate of other people. I begin to see that if I don't change those things in the 5th column, if I stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, that I'm going to keep right on doing the same old things I've always done, drunk or sober. I'm going to keep right on hurting people. And they're going to retaliate, and I'm going to resent, and eventually it's going to block me off from God, and I'm going to get drunk over it. But just think, if I could become a little less selfish, I don't have to get perfect, I never will. But if I could become a little less selfish, if I could become a little less dishonest, if I could become less frightened and self-seeking, if I could become a little more considerate of other people and their needs and their wants, maybe I wouldn't have to do some of that kind of stuff. Maybe I wouldn't hurt people, and maybe they wouldn't retaliate, and I wouldn't have to resent. And just maybe I wouldn't have to get drunk over it. A guy comes to me and he's committed adultery 44 times. I don't care about that. All I want to know is what is within him that caused him to do it in the first place. If he's stolen 364 times, I don't care about that. What I want to know is what's within him that caused him to do that. That's what we'll talk about in step 5. In that 5th column, I now see the character defects, and I'm going to become willing to turn loose of in step 6. Out there in that 5th column, I see the shortcomings now I'm going to ask God to take away in step 7. And in my case, all the names from column 1 came off of this sheet to be added to the sheet later to be used for steps 8 and 9. Because you see, when I get to step 8, it says I've got the list. I made it when I took step 4. In my case, every one of those. In your case, probably some of them. In my case, all of them. Resentments have disappeared, and they've been replaced with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. Did we do anything to be afraid of?
No.
Did we make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items?
No.
Did we do anything that was too complicated?
No.
I've never seen anything like this inventory, according to the Big Book.
And that was our last slide, and I happen to agree with them. That same situation that I talked about earlier, the relationship that I spent years in resentment over, was relieved almost instantly when I could see my part in it. I could see where I needed to change. I could see that I lost my own dignity. He didn't take that from me. I lost my own integrity. He didn't take that from me. So this works if we work it, for sure. Absolutely. And with that, I thank you for your time. Next week, we will start part 2 of step 4, which is going to be fear, the fear inventory, and we will also do the sex and
Thanks for recovering with us.